Welcome to the Ministry of Counting Sheep. Tonight's episode, The Sleep History of Sheep and Fibre Arts by Monster Boy.
Good evening. My name is Monster Boy, and I am a soft sculpture artist. While my name may be a little intimidating, I assure you that this podcast will be relaxing and gentle as these sounds guide you to sleep. So softly close your eyes if you haven't already and get comfortable. Make all your adjustments until your body feels just right. Now breathe in. Enjoy how the air feels filling your lungs like a cold, refreshing glass of water in the middle of the night. Breathe again, deeper this time. Hold for just a moment and exhale. And again. Tonight I will be talking about the history of wool. I will be needle felting in the background, which will sound like this. This is the sound of my needle going into the wool and into the foam mat. And then we'll talk more about this process later. I will be talking about how we got to where we are today with sheep and different methods for processing their famous fluff, wool. Sheep were among the first animals to be domesticated by humans around 13,000 years ago. At this time, they were used for their milk, meat, and skins. It is uncertain who the modern-day sheep's ancestor is, but it is likely selective breeding with an animal called mouflon. Similar to the mountain goat, the mouflon calls the Cyprus and Caspian region home. This region covers eastern Turkey, Armenia, and Iran. The mouflon has short, chestnut fur with patches of black and white that kind of resembles a saddle. Males have large horns that curl all the way around, making a striking circular appearance from the front. Females have much smaller horns, closer to those that you might see on a domestic billy goat. Adult males develop a majestic ruff of coarse, long hair on their chest, which is white at the throat. They have white and cloven feet, as if they're wearing socks, pulled up to the knees. It is thought that 5,000 years ago, after the domestication of this creature, that the woolly version of the sheep was born. It is likely that the wool was quite coarse and unrefined at the time. Curly hair is very rare among wild animals, so it's generally a trait given to domestic animals through selective breeding. While we often think of wool being warm, these curls can also do a wonderful job of protecting the animals against the sun's rays. Though sheep shouldn't be allowed to get too hot, a fully fleeced sheep would be happy at temperatures under 33 degrees Celsius. Now let's jump another 3,000 years. The first woven garments are coming into existence. From an archaeological standpoint, the first found wool garment fragments were preserved in a Danish swamp. Though by this time, wool was popular, and it's believed that there were already many spinning, weaving, and felting methods in use around the world. It is not surprising, as weaving is one of humanity's oldest crafts. We are incredibly good at turning plant and animal matter into objects of utility. For felting, it is thought that the first felted item was likely a sock or a mitten that had been woven and became felted with the sweat and heat of the wearer's body. The Persians, Greeks, and Romans used wool to keep them warm beyond their home climates. The Romans took sheep with them everywhere, as they continued to improve wool quality. As many cultures discovered the sheep, they were beloved for their gentle nature and warm wool. The process of turning a freshly shorn fleece into usable wool can be a time-intensive one if you're working on your own. To keep a sheep happy and healthy, they are shorn once a year, generally in the spring as the weather begins to warm and the mornings are no longer frosty. This also makes it easier for the new spring lambs to feed. A person who shears a sheep, as you may have guessed, is called a shearer. A good shearer will be able to shear a sheep in under 2 minutes, though the world record is 38 seconds. A great shearer will do so with a firm but gentle hand, making sure that the sheep feels calm and safe and nick-free. Seeing the soft, beautiful fleece underneath is satisfying, as it falls away as if the sheep is removing a coat, white and clean on the inside. Once the shear is finished, they will place the sheep upright, and it will scamper off to join the rest of the newly trimmed flock. The fleece will then be laid out, and any obviously imperfect areas will be removed. There's sometimes patches of other colors, non-wool areas that grow thick, coarse hairs, or areas that are simply too soiled to bother with cleaning. Once these areas are removed, then the fleece is ready for washing. The most common method for cleaning by hand is washing the wool in hot water. You must be very gentle so that it does not felt at this stage. Delicately soaking it in water that's hot enough to remove any debris and insects. Depending on how clean the wool was upon starting, this process may need to be repeated 2 or 3 times. Once your wool is washed out, it is time to lay it out to dry. A warm, sunny spot is ideal, making sure to turn it as the top dries. At this step, you will likely have sweet little curls and ringlets, depending on the sheep variety. The next step is called carding, and this is brushing out the wool to gain maximum length. Some people will use handheld brushes that are very similar to one you might use on your cat or dog. But there's also bigger equipment for the job, for people who have lots of wool to go through. These will often be drum carders, and they have tines around a big drum that spins in a circle and sucks up the wool as you turn a handle. This will also loosen any stubborn grass fiber that may be hanging onto the wool. Once your wool is carded, you will now have a wool bat. This is sometimes also called core wool. This wool will be your blank slate, and it can be used in a number of ways. For example, spinning is how we make wool into yarn. This is done by spinning the wool by feeding it from your hand into a spinning object. For spinners at home, this is often done with a spinning wheel. But the technology does not need to be that complicated. It can even be done with a stick and a potato. There are a few different weights for wool, but they can have many different names, making selecting the right weight daunting for some. But do not fret. Charts can be looked up online that will tell you the names for that weight, as well as what needle sizes pair with it. For example, a medium weight is the most common. This can also be known as a 4, an Afghan, Aran, or worsted. Once the wool has been spun, it can be knitted or crocheted or woven into a garment. There are endless patterns from blankets to stuffed animals that can be found for these textile artists to follow. But many also enjoy making their own pattern and sharing that. Knitting and crocheting both use needles, but in very different ways. Crochet is often described as being more beginner-friendly, as it can make projects more quickly and only uses one needle. This needle is also called a crochet hook. It can come in many different sizes depending on how tight or how loose you want your project. While learning to crochet, many people will start with the granny square. This can be used as a dishcloth or later turned into bigger projects such as blankets or sweaters. Crochet cannot be made with a machine, so anytime you see something crocheted, you know it was made by hand. Knitting uses 2 needles. One needle to hold the project, while the other weaves wool back and forth, slowly switching on to the other side as you work. The 2 most common stitch types are purl and knit stitch. Knitting also has many different needle sizes, lengths, and types, such as the circular knitting needle, in which there's a cable that varies in length and attaches at the end of 2 short needles. Knitting has been with us for a very long time. It is believed that the oldest example is from Egypt in the 5th century. And now we have many artists who push the boundaries for what we think as for knitting. One of these artists is Moliana, who makes large underwater playgrounds out of carefully knitted objects. Another artist is Oleg. Oleg will crochet objects from bikes to buildings, wrapping their wool around their desired subject, with important meanings to space, time, and the object itself, making a hyper colorful statement. There is also wet felting, believed to originate from Siberia and Mongolia. This process is achieved by applying hot water to the wool and agitating it, causing the fibers to hook together. With this technique, people can mix different kinds of wool or silks and create beautiful tapestries that really showcase the qualities of the fiber being used. Or it can be kept as simple and practical as a slipper. Wet felting works by layering dry fibers back and forth and adding soap and warm water, and then rolling it, usually in bubble wrap, or agitating it with hands to form a desired shape. Wet felting does not always need to be flat and can take the form of bowls or mittens. Needle felting, or dry felting, is another process to get the fibers to mat together. But instead you used a barbed needle to achieve the finished result. That's what you hear me doing today. This method was originally used in the 1880s by needle punch machines used to make quilt bats. Eleanor Stanwood in the United States is credited with being the first to use the single needle technique in the 1980s for making sculptural works. So the needle felting technique is quite new, adored for its precision and the realism that can be achieved. For needle felting, it requires a special needle with grooves in it that mats the wool together. These needles come in different weights, and the grooves can be cut in different ways to affect the wool. It can be tricky to get a project going. Starting your needle felting sculpture will be one of the most time-consuming parts of the project. But don't give up. Once you've done enough poking with the needle, it will firm up nicely. It can happen suddenly, where your creature will start forming. Once you've got something that's somewhat firm, you can now move on to adding the details and extra colors. I always recommend a coarse fill wool for the base of bigger projects, and a medium grade wool for the outside. It may be tempting to grab some merino, but the softer the wool, the longer it takes to needle felt. Though I have been told, with patience and practice, it will give you a smoother finished result. But I'm not sure that I believe that. For all these techniques discussed above, you can also use any fiber that has natural scales on the hair shaft. The coarser the fiber, the more scales it has. Think of the difference between Angora rabbit fur versus horsehair. Horsehair will have more scales and grooves to the shaft of the hair. Some people might felt their pet's hair, such as cats, dogs, and rabbits. But goats, camels, yaks, and alpacas have also been long used for their hair and wool. There was even a now extinct Salish woolly dog that was found along the west coast of North America, whose wool was spun into blankets and clothing. With many people taking up hobby farming, folks are interested in keeping woolly animals again. Sheep are a popular choice. Sheep are happiest in flocks of 5 and more, feeling safe with their friends and family. Though there is plenty of choice for sheep breeds now. If you love the look of their sweet faces and kind nature, but don't want to have to shear them every year, there are varieties that grow hair just as their ancient ancestors. Some popular examples are the Dorper and the Katahdin. The Dorper is a striking sheep that is all white except for the black head. Comes from South Africa and is well suited for arid climates. Because of this, it is also popular in Australia. The Katahdin is an unusual looking sheep developed in the USA. It is named after the Katahdin Mountain, and while the color can vary, often the pattern on its coat looks something like what you would see on a brown cow. The mixing of milky chocolate brown patches and creamy white, its long curving back and stout legs and wide snout give it the appearance much like a small cow. Some more uncommon varieties include the Barbados black belly and the Saint Croix from more tropical regions. The Barbados black belly is a beautiful sheep with its black and biscuit pattern in a striking, sleek combination. It's as if somebody loaded up a paintbrush with rich black and painted the insides of their ears, eyebrows, and chin. As the name suggests, they are also black underneath, completing this fantastic pelt. The Saint Croix is where the Gadian is derived from. They are sometimes also called Virgin Island sheep. They look very similar to a sheared all-white sheep. They are incredibly hardy and parasite resistant, which is why they are often used for crossbreeding with other species. For woolly sheep breeds, Merino is a popular choice for its incredibly soft and luxurious texture. This is a fantastic wool for spinning into yarn, as it is far less itchy. Merino sheep are all white. They are very woolly and have a very stout and bulky appearance. Their soft rolls of wool pulling around their necks and legs makes them look as if they're wearing puffy jackets of wool. They sometimes also sport large round ram horns. For needle felting, a common sheep to use is Corriedale. This is the wool that I often use for my own projects. It is a medium-grade wool that felts nicely and doesn't take too long to work with. The Corriedale sheep looks, as most would imagine, a typical sheep. Fluffy and round with their little pink ears. There are also hobbyists who might choose to specialize in certain endangered breeds. These are often known as heritage breeds. Not only do farmers like the feeling of keeping history alive, but often these varieties can be more hardy. It's often reported that they will also be more caring mothers and have less birthing complications. Overall, shepherds around the world have adored their tender flocks for thousands of years. The only animal that has been with us for longer is the dog. It's an iconic symbol for many countries in their badges, crests, and mythology. It's often used as a metaphor for being a follower, a lack of individuality. But I think there is so much to be learned from the sheep about letting go of things that are out of your control and about finding your flock. In the background, you hear me needle felting away on a project of mine. I am making a friend named Rasp. Rasp is short for raspberry, and I give them that name because of their raspberry pink nose, mouth, and hair. Rasp resembles a dog in many ways. Based off of a poodle in their design, they are a puppet of sorts. Their mouth opens and closes joyously as they sing along to their favorite songs. I can't wait to finish Rasp and to have them sing all sorts of wonderful things in the near future. Rasp's coat is mostly made from a coarse fill wool. It gives them a rough texture, which I like because when I use a nicer, softer wool for their nose and eyes, it makes it pop so much more. Rasp also has a pink mohawk and pom-poms adorning the ends of their long, floppy ears. They have shining pink eyes with long eyelashes at the bottom and a long, smiling mouth. Rasp is the first puppet I've ever made, and I imagine them being paired with a similar puppet named Rascal. Rascal will be a retriever type, and he will be the more masculine voices in their band as they sing along to silly punk songs and maybe sometimes talk about what it's like to be a puppet. Art is funny that way. I don't always know where the ideas come from, but I respect them and make them anyway. Being an artist is like that. It's like being summoned to a calling. And because I specifically make monsters, I often imagine them coming to me and asking to be made. And I bring them into this world at their own request, where they can be their own personalities and interact with people and make incredible impressions. Maybe you find that too. Maybe you're still finding your artistic voice. Just listen to it. Get those creative ideas out. Most importantly, don't forget to play.
The Ministry of Counting Sheep is an Integrate Arts Society curatorial project funded through the Capital Regional District. The series was produced by Reagan Shrum, Lee Wah, and Rebecca Wang. Tryson Newing created the introduction music. Special thanks to Rance Monk.